Right. It's time to begin our public lecture, which is going to be delivered by Professor Nicholas Robert Hurst. Um, First of all, I want to recognize the presence of the President of the Faculty, Professor Arminda Brito, and all the other professors present from the English Studies course, Portuguese and Cape Verdean Studies, and we have literally recruited Professor Dominica Swelken to the English Studies because of our contribution. Thank you so much for being here. To our students, the master's program and the undergrad program, thank you very much for your presence here. I have a very huge task of introducing Professor Hurst. His CV is almost 20 pages, and I tried my best to summarize the curriculum vitae of Professor Hurst in 2.5 or almost 3 pages of my very medical doctor's handwriting. Professor Nicholas Robert Hurst is an assistant professor at the Department of Anglo-American Studies, Faculty of Letters, University of Porto. He has been working there since 1989. He holds a Bachelor of Arts, honors in English and History, a Master's of Arts in Applied Linguistics from the University of Reading, and he holds a PhD in Anglo-American Studies with a focus on cultural studies from the University of Porto. He has taught various disciplines from general English to linguistics, culture, didactics at both graduate and postgraduate levels. And when we say postgraduate levels, we mean master's and PhD levels. He is a constant participant in the EU-sponsored Socrates scheme, teacher mobility program in the European Union, and he has visited various universities in Europe, namely the Czech Republic, Belgium, Germany, and England. Well, I mentioned England. There is something I'm going to talk about Professor Hurst, which probably you will find very interesting. He has held very important positions at the University of Porto. He is a teacher trainer on the College of London Certificate in TESOL program with the British Council in Porto. He is a founder member and first vice president, 1997 to 2000, of the Association of Portuguese Language Teachers, APRO Línguas, the Portuguese Association of Higher Education Language Teachers, He has published widely, which is why his CV is almost 20 pages. There are around 10 to more pages just on his publications. He has published widely around at international and national. When I say national, I mean Portugal. Reviewed journals and books. In fact, he brought 2 books, of which he participated as an editor, which we're going to share with the master's student later on. And probably students also from the undergrad would be interested to read those books. He's going to talk on the role of culture in foreign language teaching material. Interestingly, Professor Hurst is the son of a migrant and he is the father of a migrant. So probably you would understand why culture is very important in his studies. Without much ado, I hand over the mic to Professor Hurst. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And you'll understand why my curriculum is 20 pages long if you picked up on the fact that I've been working at the university since 1989. There's a direct relationship between the length of time I've been working and the length of my curriculum. So don't need to worry about that too much. Is everybody comfortable? How's the air conditioning? All right? Yeah? Would you be terribly shocked if I take off my jacket? Would you be terribly shocked if I now take off my shirt? Well, maybe 30 years ago. Not now. Okay, so we need to move to the PowerPoint presentation so we can make a start on this. So this is basically what the subject of my doctoral thesis was a few years ago now, but trying to make it a bit more practical, a bit less theoretical than it was when I had to deal with it over 400 pages or whatever it was. So you can see here from the topic what we're going to be talking about today. You can also see from the flags a connection with the reference that Professor Saidu made to migration. My father was from New Zealand, and he moved to England in 1939. Wow. Yes, it was his favorite story. He was on a boat from New Zealand. There were no planes from New Zealand to the rest of the world in those days. He was on a boat. And young men had to work on the boat in order to go where they wanted to go. You couldn't be just a passenger. So he was working as a radio operator on the boat. And they got as far as Panama Canal, you know, Caribbean, when the war started in 1939. So they had to stop in the Caribbean and join all the ships together to make a convoy across the Atlantic so it would be safer. That was one of his favorite stories. He told it on a regular basis. So in 1985, I left England and my parents and moved to Portugal. Don't ask me why. So long ago, I can't remember. And since then, I've been working in Portugal. I guess I've become a little bit Portuguese through a process of what you might call a culturalization or something like that. And here we are today in Cabo Verde. It's not the first time, this is not my first visit to Cabo Verde. I came here before most of you were born in September of 1988. Yeah, really, I am that old. I came here, not here, to Ilha de Sal, 1988, for my honeymoon. So my memories of Cabo Verde are quite good. Interesting times. Okay, should we do this? Does this work? No. Okay, so from the title, you see we're talking about teaching materials. Today, for the purposes of this talk, my definition of teaching materials is textbooks or course books, whatever you want to call them. Some people call them textbooks, some people call them course books. Generally in Portuguese, we call them manuais, manuais escolares. So that's what we're talking about today. Of course, there are other materials we use in the classroom, videos, worksheets we make ourselves, the internet resources, and so on and so on and so on. But we're not talking about that today, we're talking about textbooks. Why? Well, pretty much every classroom you go into, which is involved in foreign language teaching, the kids are using a book, right? Books have a very strong role in education. Even today, with the internet. Oh, let's not talk about the internet today. Oops. So maybe we still do need books. Yeah. Anyway, there are books in every classroom, and people have been talking about whether that is a good thing or a bad thing in terms of the kind of teaching, the kind of learning we want to take place in a foreign language classroom. So back in 1982, Robert O'Neill, who was a great course book writer back in those days, and became quite rich doing it, so I don't like him very much, he said this. So he had reasons why he thought course books were good in the classroom. Other people more recently have also justified why we have course books in our language classrooms. This is a reference from Brian Tomlinson. If you're interested in materials development and materials evaluation in connection with language teaching, he is probably your number one reference. Brian Tomlinson. And that's how he justifies the fact that we have lots of textbooks. Actually, he's quite anti-textbook, but we'll leave that for another day, perhaps. So why are we talking about culture today? We're talking about culture today for these reasons. Just read that for a minute. So what does this tell us? It tells us that traditionally, when we talk about language teaching, we talk about 4 skills, right? But probably we need to expand our range of skills that are going on in the classroom and think about perhaps culture as a 5th skill. There may be a 6th and a 7th and an 8th as well, that we'll talk about some other time. But today, if we think about culture as a 5th skill, and you see the thing it says at the end, why culture is so important, because without understanding the culture, we can't make sense of the world around us. Right? And this happens right from day one. Right from day one. So, me learning Portuguese as a rather retarded English person found great difficulty in learning Portuguese. There's lots of things about Portuguese that are difficult. But for example, I think there was a conspiracy about when do you say, when does bom dia finish and boa tarde begin? Because every time I used to go to work, I would say bom dia and then go boa tarde. And every time I would say boa tarde, they'd go boa noite. It's some kind of cultural conspiracy here against British people, perhaps with good reason. But okay, so when does morning finish? When does afternoon begin? When does night begin? You can't get the Portuguese right unless you understand that cultural concept. Yeah? So when does the morning finish? 11:59. In Portugal, you probably get a different answer from here, right? In Portugal, they usually connect it with food, because everything in Portugal is connected with food. So it's to do with the fact if you have already eaten or not. That's the morning, afternoon, for a lot of people, not necessarily everyone. Yeah? So another thing, when you're trying to make a difference, make a comparison between languages, maybe English and Portuguese. So in Portuguese, we've got bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. And that is a greeting, right? So, what are the equivalent greetings in English? Bon dia in English is? And boa tarde in English is? And boa noite in English is? Pois é. Pois é. That's culture. Yeah? And culture operates at both an individual level and also at a group level. Yeah? So it may depend on an individual interpretation. That may be something to do with time and culture and so on. But it's also to do with what we call pragmatics. So, for example, boa noite in Portuguese functions as a greeting. We established that, yeah? And it also functions as a farewell. It's hello and it's goodbye. Boa noite. In English, boa noite, good night, is only a farewell. It's not a greeting. So we have to say good evening. So I get emails from my students late at night because they're panicking about deadlines. And they say, good night, Professor. So I just close the email. Bye. Hey, it works for me. It works for me. So this is culture, yeah? This is culture. And you can imagine that's right from day one. How to say hello, how to greet someone, how to say goodbye. That's the first thing you learn. And you can't get it right unless you get the culture right. So, have a look at this. Okay. So what this does, this establishes that we're in dangerous territory here. Yeah? Because we've got to deal with things that might have something to do with prejudice, that might have something to do with stereotypes. We're in dangerous territory here. And we have to be careful and not fall into the trap of generalizations and things like that. I once heard a very nice little phrase about generalizations, which I'll share with you, whether you like it or not. So the phrase goes like this: all generalizations are dangerous, including this one. So we've got a problem. We're in a dangerous area here. For example, stereotypes. British people have a stereotype about Irish people. You know this. We think they are, how can I put this politely? Educationally challenged? It's a stereotype. Of course, it's nonsense. Irish writers, for example, have won more Nobel Prizes than English writers. So to think they're a bunch of dumb people is kind of weird. So why do we have these stereotypes? Probably because it simplifies the world. Yeah? Everything is in nice boxes. It's very easy to understand. It's kind of always been like that. Yeah? And that makes it something very strong. So what we have to do with stereotypes in relation to culture and foreign language teaching is not just let it pass by, it's that we have to actively confront it and destroy it. Because if you don't confront it, what will happen? It will go on and on because it's simple, because it's strong, because it's easy to understand. So you have to confront it and break it to pieces. So, we're in dangerous territory. So, I didn't say it before. Oh, out of control already. This is Claire Cramsh. She's like the original lady who started talking about culture and language teaching and so on. She was a German teacher in America. And she's written lots and lots of stuff about this. She's still writing. She's pretty ancient nowadays. But she wrote something really good, for example, in 2012. So she's a very important writer in this field, Claire Cramsh. This is Adrian Holiday. He's British and a bit younger. And he writes lots of interesting stuff about culture as well. And he also writes stuff about what he calls appropriate methodology, locally appropriate methodology. So he's worth looking into as well. I like his stuff so much that I invited him to come to my university. And he came and he gave a talk, and it was wonderful, and he said this. Good stuff, huh? Yeah. He was just talking. His talk at the conference was pretty amazing. No PowerPoint. He just sat down in a sort of comfortable chair and did this amazing sort of narrative. It was like storytelling. It wasn't like an academic conference. But it was really profound, really interesting. But unfortunately, it was also on a Saturday morning, so not many people came. Anyway, if you like this sort of stuff, you need to check out Adrian Holiday. He's good. I think what he's saying about culture is nice as well. What he's saying up the top. Is that giving us a very strong idea that culture is not something that's fixed. Yeah? So the way we act, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we speak, that's culture, right? The way you do that is not the same as the way your mum and dad did that. Do you agree? Yeah. So their culture, in some way, is different from yours. But of course, it's also shared. Do they listen to the same music as you? Do they watch the same movies? When I was young, when I was your age, my parents kept telling me to turn off the music. Turn off that horrible noise. It's different now. I actually listen to the music with my kids. So it's an interesting difference between generations. So this idea that culture is not fixed is very important. And is not singular. I think we also need to be talking about cultures. I don't think I need to tell anybody from Cabo Verde that Cabo Verdean cultures is a better way to talk about things, isn't it? This island, this community, another island, another community, yeah? Ways of speaking, ways of making music, ways of making food, and so on. That there's no such thing as a singular Cabo Verdean culture, right? And that's true of all communities, I think, all communities. And that's important for us as teachers. This is another important writer. You have to sit in the dangerous seats. if you come late. So, this is an important writer as well. This is a Danish woman, Karen Risager, from a university in Denmark, who's into the culture and foreign language thing as well. I really like this quotation just for two reasons, really. I think there are two things in red, right? The second one, I think, is the important one, the global flow of meaning. Because that's the kind of world we're living in now. We're probably a bit bored about talking about globalization, yeah? But it's a fact. It's a fact, yeah? The way that people move, and the way that we dip into other cultures and all those things. Globalization is a fact, okay. So, how does that connect with culture? It connects with culture because a famous writer once said, in his definition of culture, culture is the public expression of meaning. Public expression of meaning. Why is that important for us? Because what we're doing in a foreign language students, with our students, is trying to give them another language to express their meanings. Yeah? Their messages, their feelings, their information, their opinions, whatever it is, their meaning. So for me, there's a very strong symbiotic connection between culture and language. Language feeds the culture, and culture feeds the language. Yeah? You can't have a culture without a language, and you can't have a language without a culture. Right? So that's the important thing from this quotation. The other thing in red is not so important. I just think it's a really nice phrase from a very serious academic. And the synonym of this phrase, or the translation of this phrase, I think is classroom. Classroom. Institutionally shaped learning space. I think she means classroom. The other important thing that we could take from Karen Risager's work is this idea, when we're dealing with learning materials, that's what we're talking about today, course books, yeah? What do you get in course books? You get lots of text, and you tend to get lots of pictures as well. Yeah? Cartoons, photos, all kinds of illustrations in the book, and lots of texts for reading or whatever. And she makes a very important point that we have to deal with both of those things, because both of those things are carrying the culture. And as language teachers, we very often forget about the visual side in our learning materials. And even the people who write the books don't really deal with the visual side. The pictures are just kind of there. They're not actually doing anything educational. They're not actually helping the kids to learn in any particular way. So that's something we need to think about and something we need to improve on, I think. How we can use visual texts in the classroom to help our learners create their own meaning. Yeah. It's all about meaning. Yeah? Language and culture. It's all about meaning. Okay. Whew. That's the heavy theoretical part. Let's have some fun. So, here's an example from a Portuguese-produced textbook, which is for 8th grade. And this is the book my daughter used to learn English in a Portuguese school. Of course, she already knew English, but she didn't want to say anything. I think the teachers knew she knew English because she has my name. Anyway, I chose this one because, as I told you, my dad was from New Zealand, right? So I thought, what are they saying in my daughter's school book about the place my dad came from? Ooh. They're saying crazy stuff. So, first of all, think about this as from a methodology point of view. We'll just look at this page. Don't worry too much about this page. This page, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pictures. The pictures are reasonably clear. Can you see the pictures? Mais ou menos. And we have 6 pieces of text, right? Can you read the text? That's a typical teacher question. I already know the answer before I ask the question. Okay, so methodologically, this is pretty cool. You have to create a meaning for the picture and match the meaning you create for the picture with the words in the text. So that's pretty cool in terms of language methodology, language teaching. I have no problem with that at all. I quite like it. My problem is with the content, the cultural content. This picture. So this is the end of the story in the history of New Zealand, right? What has happened to this guy? Sorry? He's been civilized. Because he's wearing a suit and he's sitting at a desk and he's got a computer. So he's modern. He's civilized, but he still has some kind of heritage thing going on his head.
Yes. Yeah.
Except, of course, in New Zealand, men don't wear that. So we've got a problem here that it's kind of factually wrong, and it's also a little bit insulting, isn't it? So people can only be civilized if they're wearing a suit and a tie. Yeah, right. So there's a problem with a lot of the pictures. What's happening here? Who's this? A man, thank you. A little more detail on that, please. He's what? He's a European guy, and he's got a cart full of good stuff. And what's he going to do with that good stuff? Offer it? Are you kidding? He's going to sell it. Exchange it, perhaps. I don't think the British people give things away so cheaply. That's not what building empires is about, I don't think. So, yeah. So here comes the nice European man, the nice British guy. He's got lots of nice stuff. He might sell it, he might exchange it, and so on. And then, yay, later on, everybody's going to be civilized because the Europeans came. Yay! Hey, people, this is just the pictures. This is not the text. Huh? So, text. I can't read this either. Number 5 here. Can you read that? No, we already did that joke. Okay. So, this is the text which corresponds to this, right? My daughter got it right. Yay! Number 5. Yay! Well done, Martha. Yeah. The text says, now, New Zealanders and Maoris is the indigenous people of New Zealand, right? Now, New Zealanders and Maoris live and work together peacefully. Say what? So one thing that we've noticed in the way that books have developed is that, for example, the books now take on the idea of English as a world language. In the old days, when I first started teaching English to foreign students, we only used to talk about England and the States, yeah? And lots of the books used to pretend that people were going on holiday to London or Oxford or something. And sometimes you saw New York or something like that. And that was it. Well, not now. Thankfully, these international books have got a bit better, and we get New Zealand and Singapore and Bangkok and so on. So now we have reasonably well established this idea of English as a world language and English as being part of world cultures. Yeah? You would probably say yes if I said English is a part of the local cultures here. Yeah? Maybe not so important as in other places, but a lot of people here use English, I would say, for business. True. A lot of people here in the university use English to read things and talk about things. Yeah? A lot of people in local shops and so on might use English to deal with tourists. Yeah? Okay, so English is a part of local cultures here in Cabo Verde. So for me, it would be fine if Cabo Verde was in an English book. Right? Why not? Learn a bit about Cabo Verde and the way people use English in Cabo Verde. Why not? Why not? It doesn't have to be about London and New York. It doesn't even have to be about those old countries that used to belong to the very friendly British Empire. You know what I'm talking about, or what we now call the Commonwealth. It doesn't have to be about them either. It can be about any country you like, because usually there's a bit of English there, yeah, in the way that I described. And if we can take our location as anywhere in the world, because English is everywhere, kind of, so it's another generalization. If we can do that, we also need to think about the people who are in the book in the same way. So anybody who has using English or contact with English can be in the books as well. Why not? Yeah? So in Portugal, we always have Cristiano Ronaldo in our books. Why not? He spent part of his life living in England, playing for an English club. Why not? He speaks English, kind of. Speaks Portuguese, kind of, as well. But hey, the man is the best footballer in the world. So, we can forgive him a lot. We need to see all kinds of people. Every kind of person needs to be in our book. Problem is, in these international books, what do we usually find? We find lots of young people. You never see any old people like me in the books, do you? Once in a while, because it's Granny and she makes a nice cake or something like that. Do you ever see anybody in a wheelchair? No. Do you ever see anybody who's sick? No, they're all healthy and happy and playing sports and going on holiday and going shopping and having these fantastic, extreme sports hobbies and kite surfing, whatever that is. It's a problem. We're lacking inclusivity. The other thing is more it's not so we're talking about place, we're talking about people, and we're also talking about topics. What is it about topics? If we're talking about international books, right? So the guys in Cambridge or Oxford or Pearson or Longman or whoever it is, they want to sell their book here in Cabo Verde. They want to sell their book in Portugal. Okay, so far so good. They also want to sell their book in Saudi Arabia. And they also want to sell their book in Fiji. How do the different communities, how do the different cultures feel about certain topics around the world? It's very limiting for international books. If you want to sell a book in Saudi, you can't have women driving cars. Well, you can now. You can now, but you can't have people drinking in public. And so on and so on. Yeah? It's limited. So this idea of appropriacy is very important. Even in what you might think is a very sort of modern, open society, like Portugal, relatively modern, relatively open society. Teenagers, books for teenagers. What are teenagers interested in nowadays? Not just nowadays, it's always been like that. What do teenagers are interested in? Exactly. But we can't talk about that in school books. You want to get a new boyfriend, you want to get a new album, you want to download the latest movie, you have to be careful because there's a guy outside the school selling drugs, your friend got in a fight and got stabbed. These are all happening in teenagers' lives, yeah? Your second cousin got pregnant. Yeah, it's the real world, right? Is any of that in the book? No. It's about saving whales, and it's about climate change, and it's about furniture or something. So there's a problem there. There's a problem there. We want people to use a foreign language, a second language, to talk about boring stuff. How is boring stuff going to engage a teenager, a young woman? To produce language, difficult. So, this doesn't seem to be working super well. Whoa. Pointing at the wrong place. So, talking about international books, what tends to happen is it's pretty boring and they're all pretty much the same. It doesn't matter if you get an Oxford book, a Cambridge book, whatever. It's going to be pretty boring and it's going to be pretty much the same in terms of topic. Okay. And it's all going to be pretty safe. Yeah? You might have thought it was a bit shocking to talk about teenage pregnancy. Britain is the country in Europe with the highest rate of teenage pregnancy. So everybody's happy, nobody's poor, nobody's unemployed, nobody's disabled, nobody's old, and very often, everybody's white. So, at least, I think it's about 10% of the population of Britain is not white. So there should be at least 10% of the people in the book, right? So, we've got a problem with international course books. I think locally produced course books can make a difference, particularly in this area. Oh, going the wrong way. So what we really want is something which is a bit more real. Yeah? A bit more real. I've got a phrase. If you're into this subject, I shall dictate this phrase to you. Are you ready? Dictation number 1. Quinta-feira. 5:40. Dictation number 1. Content-rich materials promote language-rich responses. Content-rich materials produce language-rich responses. I'm not really interested in talking about the furniture in my bedroom. Or, what time I take the bus to go to school. We have to do better than that, I think. We have to make it a bit more interesting. Also, we have to deal with culture at the level of language. Right. So, what does that mean? Giving advice in English. How do we give advice in English? I'm ill. I need a doctor. What do you say to me? You should go to the doctor. Or, different language. Why don't you go to the doctor? Or, you might want to go to the doctor, you silly, stubborn man. Or, I advise you seriously to go to the doctor. You're not saying the one I want. Go to the doctor, yes. Caramba. Yeah, okay. You're not saying the one. Didn't you learn? You're shocking students of English. Didn't you learn at school or wherever? You ought to go to the doctor. Yes. Oh, come on. Yeah. Have you forgotten so much of your English? You ought to go to the doctor. Didn't you learn that? Yes. Yeah. So how come none of you remembered it? Because nobody uses it. So we have to be careful about what English we're doing. We have to be current and we have to be honest. Yeah? There's no point in teaching ought to anymore. Nobody uses it. Did you learn, here's another example. Did you learn question tags at school? Ah, marvelous, aren't they? Marvelous. It's a beautiful today. No, it's a beautiful day today. Isn't it? You come from Cabo Verde. Too difficult, okay. Haven't we met? We've met before. Ah, better. Absolute waste of time. What do English people do nowadays? They use isn't it for everything. Or not even isn't it. They use in it. In it. In it. And yet we hit our kids over the head with these question tags until they bleed. Are you are bleeding now, aren't you? You will remember this forever, won't you? But you will never use it. Yeah. The other thing here is we have to be careful about, in the books in Portugal, I said we had Cristiano Ronaldo. All right? So he's a kind of pop culture, representative of pop culture. And sometimes we get people from music, people from movies, you know, Brad Pitt, I don't know, Justin Bieber, I don't know, all these people. Yeah. The problem is, of course, we have the books for, in Portugal, we have to keep the books for 7 years. So the new book comes and it stays for 7 years. Yeah? Is Justin Bieber going to be important 7 years from now? Is Brad Pitt going to be important 7 years from now? Are you still going to have a poster on your bedroom wall of Cristiano Ronaldo in 7 years? I'm never going to take mine down. Actually, I still have a poster of Deco. You remember Deco? Deco? He's in my downstairs bathroom. I think he's the best football player Porto ever had. Okay. What are we talking about? Pop icons. So they have to be careful because they have a short shelf life. Celebrity is usually something which is quite short. It's unusual to be a celebrity for a long time. So we have to be careful about that. And we also have to be careful about what they represent. So, film stars, pop stars, what do they represent? They represent someone with a particular talent, maybe, a particular skill. But why are they celebrities? Because of the skill or because they're rich? Because they're on TV a lot? Because they're rich? Because they have talent? So, do we need that in a school book? Don't we get that on TV all the time? And magazines and internet and whatever. Do we need that in a school book? So I say this to the people who write the books in Portugal, and they say, but the kids love it. Sure, I mean, they love McDonald's as well, but you don't want them to eat McDonald's every day. Yeah? They love not doing homework. You don't want them to not do homework every day. And they say, but they love it. It's good for motivation. If you read about motivation, there are other ways to create motivation, other ways to sustain motivation than just having a picture of a famous guy or woman or whatever. So we have to be careful with that. Going the wrong way. Okay, so what we do now is we'll have a look at a few examples. I'm taking one topic, which is the world of work, jobs, profession, and we'll go back in time and look at how books deal with this topic through time and through different levels. Okay? Is that okay? So, this is from 1995. Good heavens. And it's for the 5th grade. So that's young kids, right? So we're supposed to be talking about what's your job? What's this job? A pirate. Yep. I'm going to school because when I grow up, I want to be a pirate. I want to be Johnny Depp. Yeah. Who's this person? Teacher. Boring. Boring. Who wants to be a teacher? When? There's some subliminal cultural things going on here that are kind of crazy. And anyway, where is the what's your job business? Where do they... Here. But it's not what's your job, it's what's his or her job. So it's talking about these people. So somehow, there's absolutely no connection here with the world of the kids. They thought they were going to make a connection maybe with a pirate, because everybody wants to be a pirate. Yeah. Yeah. Very strange. Actually, I think this is grammar in disguise. Look. And vocabulary. And it's about pronunciation. So really, there's sort of zero culture here that the kids can get connected to. But that was 1995. Okay. Come on, people. Why doesn't this change when I want it to change? I'm going the wrong way again. So this is my daughter's book again. So it's a sort of jobs vocabulary thing. So what you need to do here is, it's a difficult one, but I want you to try, find the women. I've been spending my life doing that, but we'll talk about that later. In this page, how many women are there? So this proves my theory. If you can do mathematics, you don't become an English teacher. What's our final answer, people? 7 in 20? So what's the cultural message there? Small workforce. Women, we don't need to talk about women and jobs, because not many women have jobs. Okay, look at those 7 women, please. And count how many important jobs there are. Don't be difficult. Okay, I withdraw the word important. Socially prestigious.
That's better.
Of the 7 women, 3? One? So I go back to there's 1 socially prestigious woman in 20 pictures. So how is that inclusive? How is that appropriate? This is not that long ago. My daughter had to use this book at school in Portugal. Okay. Am I going to go the wrong way again? So here's 9th grade book, which my daughter had to use as well. So this is only for the ladies in the room. This is only for the ladies in the room. Choose which job you want. Good, huh? So personally, I think I want to be this one. Yeah, mixed. Oh, maybe not. This one and this one? And what the hell are you supposed to do with this anyway? They're only half people. They're only half people. and there's only men. So, good choice for the ladies. You can be half a man if you're lucky. Ninth grade? So, ninth grade, how old are the kids? 14, 15? 14, 15-year-old people, and you're telling them you can be half a man? Wow. Come on. Okay. So, this is Bell and Gower, 1998. Bell and Gower were course book writers. This is what they say about the process. Have a look. There's some reasonably bizarre things going on here as well. We talked about this, yeah? When we were talking about, teenage pregnancy and whatever. Yeah? So we covered that. Then there's this concept of political correctness, which is weird as well. And this I find very strange. That only older kids have the right to talk about important stuff. Younger kids have to talk about the environment and saving the whale and furniture. Only older kids get the chance to talk about important, interesting stuff. Weird. And basically, this is weird as well. Saying that students don't want it. Students are not interested. Students are happy to have this rubbish. That can't be right, can it? And then finally what they say is they admit to a kind of censorship, self-censorship, and also publisher-driven censorship. Very, very strange things going on here, very strange things. So, here's another example. This is a bit like the New Zealand example. You know this is Scotland because there's a man in a kilt. And there's some bagpipes. Oh look, and there's a man in a kilt with bagpipes. So you know this is Scotland. We've talked about problems with pictures already. And we've talked about problems with text. And we've talked about stereotypes. How many stereotypes can you see in these pictures? Almost every single one of them is reinforcing a stereotype, right? Scotland is this country with castles and lakes and stuff, and all the men dress like this, and there's lots of these beautiful towns, and I don't know what that is. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 6 are reinforcing stereotypes. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. Then we look at the text. I'll just give you one or two examples. Here. The Highlanders are the inhabitants of a very famous region in Scotland, the Highlands. I wouldn't have guessed that if you didn't tell me that people called Highlanders come from a place called the Highlands. Good, good. These people, what does that say? Often play the bagpipes. A Scottish typical instrument. There's a mistake there. It should be typical Scottish instrument, which has a very loud and continuous sound. These people also wear tartan cloaks instead of coats. This is just fantasy. This is just total fantasy. Very, very odd, very odd. And slightly more serious, Glasgow is the largest city in Scotland, and it's famous for its football teams. We want now, it has to be real, authentic, yeah? Not made up, not fantasy, not fictional. We want stuff which is appropriate, yeah? Things which are going to be interesting and appropriate for the kids. And that doesn't mean always talking about football or pop music or whatever. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. And we want stuff which is accurate, that doesn't tell us the wrong information. Yeah? That thing about Scotland had lots of mistakes in it. Factual mistakes, language mistakes, all kinds of mistakes. It has to be accurate, appropriate, and authentic. Yeah? That's the idea. Take a minute to just read that. We've got about 10 minutes to go, 15 minutes to go if you stay with it. Less perhaps than 10 minutes. 5? 4? So, this is a young person talking to their parents about daily life, troubles of daily life, la 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 la. Authentic? No way. Children don't talk to parents like this, and parents don't talk to children like this. Look at these huge pieces of language. Yeah? Huge, huge things. This is not a dialogue. Dialogues are ba-bing, 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 ba-bing. Yeah? This is not authentic. This is not appropriate. 9th grade. Why would this be of any interest to 14, 15-year-olds? Yeah? And probably it's got some mistakes in it as well, with language and things like that. Very, very strange. Very strange indeed. And I think this is my last example. Remember what we were talking about with pictures? This is 8th grade. So this is what, 13, 14 years old? So, 13, 14-year-old boys, what are they going to be thinking about when they see this page of the book? English grammar?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm going to be thinking about English grammar. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. English grammar all the way. This kind of seriously, is almost pornographic. Almost. In a school book context. Very strange. From a visual text point of view. Looking at the text itself. So we're interviewing Calvin Klein, who is this fellow. The activity is just nonsense. Why would you write questions when you already know the answers? When does that happen in the real world? Why are we asking our kids to do nonsense activities that are of no connection with the real world? Crazy. That's a methodological thing. In terms of content, what's question number 1? Tell me what question number 1 is. What's your name? What's your full name? Yeah? Not what's your name. What's your full name? Will they get that right? No. the very first thing we're asking them to do, you can pretty much guarantee they'll get wrong. Is that a good way to start an activity? No. You're doing an interview with a very famous person. The first question you ask him is, what's his name? He's going to walk out. I'm a journalist, I've come to interview. What's your name? So, last two slides, last two. So, this is Mike Byram. If you're interested in culture and cultural content, you must read this man's work. Michael Byram. Michael Byram. He's the man who first got me started on this a long time ago. And it emphasizes the point that we started here. You can't, remember, right from day one, if you don't have the culture, you can't get the language right. Remember? Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. You can't get it right unless you have the cultural significance of those words. Mike Byram. And it's not even worth thinking about accuracy and fluency and complexity until we understand that concept, and until we build that into our teaching. And the very last thing is this one. So it's about language and the things associated with the language, it's about culture, and it's about the work culture does in our social interactions. Okay? We have to understand those things. Okay? For example, in Portugal, in a university situation, you have to understand how to address your colleagues. You know, all this stuff with Professor Doutor and Senhor Doutor and Senhor Engenheiro, and it took me ages to get that right. And I still don't get it right, you know, and I've been in Portugal for 30 years. So I say to my students, this is my final joke of the day, the first year students, I say, my official title is Professor Doutor. You must never call me teacher. I don't want to be called teacher. You don't go, hey teacher. You call me by my name, Nick, or you call me by my academic title, Professor. And if you're not happy with that, I have one more alternative. You can call me just simply Your Majesty. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Professor Hurst. Thank you very much. Foreign language teaching, globalization and culture, content in textbooks, what can be excluded, what can be included. And of course, it talks about the AAA, that textbook materials have to be authentic, appropriate, and accurate. The floor is open for comments, for contributions, for questions and observations.